Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. For today's card, I am using Simon Says Stamp's Daisy Stem, Sunflower Stem, and Cosmos Stem wafer dies. And I had die cut them from some Distress watercolor paper. And then to use them, I am just taping some painter's tape to a cutting board, sticky side up. Probably could have gotten away with just using one piece, but I did two because I thought, you know, the length of the stems and whatnot. So I'm just taping them into place so that I can press these die cut flowers into that tape so that they're just kind of held in place so that I can watercolor them. I would also do this if I was going to color with like Copics or just any coloring medium really, because it just kind of helps. So I'm not having to hold little areas since I'm going to color obviously right up to the very edge. So once they're taped into place, I am using my Altenew watercolor palette to color these in, doing some very, very simple watercoloring. I started with the Cosmos because I was going to do it pink, and it's just kind of force of habit. It's like, ooh, pink. So with these die cuts, technically, all the center portions on like that sunflower as well as the daisy can be popped out. So it would just be more of an outline. But when I ran these through my die cut machine, I purposely didn't, you know, do multiple passes. I didn't use a metal shim. I do recommend one, especially with the sunflower one because there's so much like detail and a lot of, you know, fine cutting. But I didn't do that because I didn't want to pop any of those pieces out. I wanted them all intact. Now, if it had cut regardless, and I would have just like taped them from the back, but it didn't. It only cut through, I think the Cosmos, it cut through in one pass, just that little centerpiece. But all the other little pieces were left in there. So when I'm going to watercolor them like this, like the color kind of will seep into the lines, you know, around the areas where it was cut into, which I was totally okay with. It just gives it like an extra little something. So I kind of go back and forth here. I was, you know, I started with the Cosmos with the pinks, and then I did a very tiny, tiny little bit of purple and gray for the daisy because I wanted to keep it mostly white. And then the sunflower, I'm doing layers of yellow. And I kept going back to this Cosmos because I was just struggling with it. It just wasn't what I was seeing in my head, and what was coming out of the brush was not the same thing. But I'm going to fix all that with some splatter anyway. So I just kind of keep going and adding, you know, a few more layers of color here and there. And leaving the centers, I'm going to do the centers once things are more dry. Because even though there's, you know, the cut areas, I don't want, you know, browns to start bleeding into all of the flower petals, etc. So once I'm kind of mostly happy with how all of the petals are looking, I'm going to add some greens for all the stems. And with the stems, I just literally slap the color on. I'm not even concerned about it. Like, it's going to get all over my cutting board and the tape, and that's fine. I'm just going to save all that anyway, like the cutting board and with the tape on it. I'm going to save for the next project because, yeah, it stays sticky for a good long time until it picks up, you know, random cat hair and dust and all that stuff. But for the stems, I started with just slapping on some light green, and then I went in with a little bit of darker, you know, to give it that little bit of extra color and whatnot. And then I'm just going to mix together a bit of brown for the flower centers. And then while the flower centers are still a little bit wet, I just go in with a little bit of a darker brown, just kind of dab on some of that color. And of course, it wasn't until like later on while I was filming, I realized like half the sunflowers, like not even in frame. Because as always, I'm just, you know, in the zone, not thinking about the camera. But yeah, with that die cut, there's a bunch of texture already. The die cut itself cuts into the center of the sunflower and creates all that texture, as well as, actually all three of them, the Cosmos and the Daisy, have just more little like dots. So, splatter. I added yellow splatter, of course, to the sunflower. And then I kind of protected the actual sunflower with just a Post-it note. So I could splatter some green on the stems. And then so I didn't have to keep like trying to mask everything. I just removed the sunflower, set it aside, and then remove the daisy. And then I'm going to add just some pink splatter to the Cosmos flower. Same thing, just kind of cover up the stem, add that little bit of pink, cover up the flower, add some green to the stem. And then I can move this out of the way and work on the daisy. And with the daisy, I actually ended up just splattering on like a very, very pale blue from the palette, just to give it, you know, that little bit of texture. But again, I didn't want to add a lot of color to this. So splattered that on, protected the flower, splattered on some green, and then I'm also going to, of course, splatter everything with some Perfect Pearls mixed with water. I never did find my little mini mister. I'd mentioned that in a previous video that I had a mini mister with Perfect Pearls in it, and I can't find it. So I filled up another one, and I'm sure the other one now is going to make an appearance, because that's always what happens. But yeah, this is just Perfect Pearl powder mixed with water in a mini mister. This is a trick I picked up from Debbie Hughes, who I mentioned in a lot of my videos. I am always watching her videos, and her watercoloring is just amazing. But yeah, she always adds that splatter, and it always gives it that extra something. So because it settles, you just got to shake up the container really well. Or like I've shown in other videos, I'll just mix Perfect Pearl powder and some water right on my work surface and then splatter it with a brush. Either way works. So I did all the splattering, set those aside to dry. For my card front, I have some Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock. And I have the stripe jumble background, a very graphic background. But I was like, this could look really nice, like almost tone on tone. So I'm inking up the background with Simon's clear embossing ink. I'd already used my anti-static powder tool on the cardstock and brushed off the excess with my little surface sweep brush. Then I bring the cardstock to the background, press it in really, really well. You could leave it here. That tone, you know, that watercolor look, that tone on tone look with just using the clear embossing ink is great. But I wanted to add clear embossing powder just for that extra, you know, shine. So I'm coating this entire stamped surface here with that clear embossing powder. And then I'm going to melt all of this with my heat tool. So it ends up being still tone on tone, but then you get that, you know, shine from the embossing powder. So I let my heat tool heat up for a little bit, didn't let it heat up long enough. So it takes a little bit longer to melt all of this embossing powder when you're doing an entire background. But I get this all melted, and then I tilt it back and forth in the light to make sure that there's no like dull grainy areas. Any of those, quickly hit them with the heat tool, melt everything till it is shiny and glossy. So then, now that I've got that done, for my sentiments, I did a video a week or two ago. This is the Thanks and Encouragement Word Mix one, and I had stamped and heat embossed and then just stamped these sentiments and then die cut them with accordion dies, and I just keep them in a little dish here on my desk. So I just grabbed that for my sentiments for this card. That pinch bolt, they're cats. So yeah, I picked them up at I get emails about that. I picked those up at a local decor store months ago, like 6 or 7 months ago. So yeah, but they're just little spice, like pinch bowls for spices, and they're perfect for holding candy, or in this case, sentiments, and that's what I do. So I have all my sentiments. So for the inside of the card, I masked off the top portion so I don't get any ink onto like the other side of the inside of the card. And I'd inked up that striped jumble background with Simon's Fog ink and then stamped that. And I love that too, the Fog ink on white. I was like, oh, I want to make another card now. It was perfect for the inside, but that would look really nice on the outside too. It's with floral, with anything. Like it's such a just nice, clean, like geometric graphic background. I love it. So stamped that on the inside of the card. For the piece that I had heat embossed on the outside, I just trimmed off the edges so it's slightly smaller than an A2 card front. And then for all my flowers here, I am adhering them with craft tacky glue. They are warped thanks to the watercoloring. If I'd wanted to flatten them out, you know, you could set them under a bunch of books, you know, old school. Or you can wrap them in copy paper and then run them through your die cut machine without any dies and, you know, just flatten them that way. But I kind of liked the dimension and texture it gave for them being a little bit warped like this. So I just adhered them just like that, right down to this card front with Simon's Craft Tacky Glue. And then the sentiments I'm popping on with some thin 3D foam squares. And then just cutting a really narrow little strip for this tiny little sentiment here. And then adding the rest of it with the Craft Tacky Glue. And I'm also going to tuck in just one more little banner sentiment from that set, since I've got this dish full of them. Like, you get so many cards out of this. I'm loving this set. Cannot wait for more from Simon, because they titled it Word Mix 1. So obviously more are coming, and that just makes me happy. So anyway, adhered my sentiments, going to adhere the card front to the card base with the craft tacky glue. Once that's adhered, I'm going to adhere another couple of these sentiments onto the inside of the card. And I will link to this set, and so you guys can check it out if you haven't seen it, because it's just awesome. So I adhered those to the inside, and then I just have to add a few embellishments to finish this off. I have some peridot and iridescent clear crystals from Studio Caudia. Just poured those into some Studio Caudia trays and then sprinkled them throughout this card and adhered into place with some craft tacky glue, just picking up each of the crystals with my little jewel picker and then pressing them down into the glue, and that's going to finish off the card. So like I mentioned earlier, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I use so you can check them out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!